Hello YouTube, welcome to another video from FS Pro in a series of videos on how to improve the scenery in X-Plane 10. Today's video is all about creating your own photo scenery. As you'll recall, if you want anything other than zoom level 16, or if you want textures from an area not covered on the xplane.fr site, you'll need to create your own. One tool that will enable you to do this is g2xpl. g2xpl is a software application that downloads textures from a user-configurable internet map service and then places them as ground textures onto X-Plane Global Scenery Mesh. Amazingly, g2xpl is free of charge. You can get it from the X-Plane org forums here. Just choose the appropriate link for your version of Windows. Note that this version has a limit on the texture resolution that can be created. If you want higher resolution, you'll need to make a donation to the author. The details on how to do this are on the same page. Can I take just a moment and encourage you to consider making a donation to the author? Not only will you be able to produce awesome textures, you'll be giving a little bit back, and it will do wonders for your karma. If you're a bit tight on money, don't worry, even €1 will get you the full version. Okay, on with the show. My experience with g2xpl is that once you've installed it correctly, it works really well. A potential downside is that it runs as a command line application and requires you to adjust settings via an INI file. There are installation instructions included with the g2xpl compressed file, and I recommend that you read them, especially if you come across any issues with your own installation. But if you want just a quick summary, here's what I did. Firstly, if you have X-Plane open, you'll need to close it down. For the next steps, you'll need to locate the plugins folder on your copy of X-Plane. Mine is at X-Plane 10, Resources, Plugins. From this point forward, I'll refer to this as the plugins folder. Extract all the files from the g2xpl compressed folder into your plugins folder. This will create a new folder called something like g2xpl 6.71. I'll refer to this as the g2xpl folder. From your g2xpl folder, copy the g2xpl.xpl and g2xpl_64.xpl files into your plugins folder. That's the basic install done. Before we can get started though, we have to edit the g2xpl.ini file to set up some initial configuration. First thing to edit is the X-Plane_dir entry in the main section. Add the location of your X-Plane installation directory here. On my computer, that's D, Program Files x86, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, X-Plane 10. Easy to remember, right? Next in the plugin section, enter a value for long and lat. This is the tile that we need to generate. For Jersey, I'll just change the large numbers to -2 and 49 respectively. In the Internet Services directory, change the is_zoom_level entry to the zoom level you want to create. By default, it's set to 18. If this is your first time trying to create textures, I recommend entering 17 as creating larger file sizes can take considerable time. One final thing. g2xpl applies textures on top of the mesh declared in the X-Plane 10 Global Scenery folder. If you installed the HD Mesh V3 as described in video 1 of this series, you want to apply your textures on top of this. You have one extra step to go through. Go to your custom scenery ZZZ underbar HD underbar global underbar scenery 3 / earth nav data folder. I wish we'd get some easier naming conventions for this. And then find the folder named +40-010. Copy the contents of that folder. Now go to your global scenery / xplane 10 global scenery / earth nav data folder. Make a copy of the folder of the same name and then paste in the folder you copied from your custom scenery folder. That's probably going to be much easier to do than it was to say. So that should be us set. Let's try and create our first texture. Fire up a command window and navigate to your g2xpl folder. By the way, if you're already at the folder in Windows Explorer, select File, Open Command Prompt as Administrator from the main menu. This will open the command window correctly located at your selected folder position. Now, just type in the commands g2xpl and your tile should start creating. Once it's done, you can check the textures by going to your custom scenery folder and checking the contents of the Z_G2xpl folder, which is where G2xpl places the textures. Select the textures folder and you should see a large number of .dds files. You can view these files if you've got compatible software such as Paint.net as I'm using here. As a final test, start xplane 10 and check the result. If anything went wrong, try the README file that's included with G2xpl first. There's an FAQ at the bottom that's really helpful. So hopefully by this stage you've done the basics and you're ready to create scenery for wherever you need it. Your first thought is probably to create the highest possible resolution you can get, but you should be aware that there's a possible performance hit. As you increase the zoom level, you'll get a decrease in your frames per second. The rate of performance drop will vary depending on your hardware and software configuration. Here's some sample data from my setup. As you can see, after zoom level 18, performance on my setup drops markedly. The reason for the drop of performance has a lot to do with the file size. There's a direct correlation between the zoom level and the size of the texture file. The higher the zoom level, the higher the file size. Here's the size of the tiles that I create for Jersey. The area covered by the tile is mostly water, so these file sizes are comparatively small. The SimHeaven site reports more normal file sizes as follows. If you're creating texture for a tile that's all on land, you'll probably find your performance drops at a lower zoom level than my example for Jersey and the Channel Islands. Of course, the only way you'll know for sure is to create a set of scenery and try it. Don't worry about having to recreate a lower zoom level if the one you just created is too slow. Simply keep a backup of the Z_G2xpl folder before you create a new zoom level and then paste it back in afterwards if needed. When considering the trade-off between zoom level and performance, you might consider that the only time you really need a high zoom level is on the ground at an airport. You're much less interested in high zoom levels when transiting a tile at 20,000 feet or above. What would be really useful is a way to create textures for a tile that resolved airports at a high zoom level and everywhere else at a lower zoom level. And luckily, G2xpl has this exact feature. You just need to adjust 3 parameters as follows. Firstly, set the high-res textures threshold radius M parameter, what a snappy name, to the size that you want to be in high resolution. Set the lat and long coordinates to the center of the airfield that you want the higher resolution for. Finally, set the IS zoom level value to the high resolution you want for the airport. The surrounding area will be created at IS zoom level -3. So using our example of Jersey, I set the high-res textures threshold radius M to 1000, and this is based on the fact that the runway length at Jersey is 1706 meters. Data from the National Air Traffic Service here in the UK. I set latitude to 49.1228 and longitude to -2.1143. Finally, I set the IS zoom level to 20. If you try this and find your colors appear washed out, there is an easy fix. Simply adjust the gamma settings in X-Plane. A great source for instructions on how to do this is at the xplane.com site, the full URL in the show notes below. So in closing, I find G2xpl to be a great application. We can create our own textures at whatever zoom level we want. But navigating the INI file and all of its options can be a bit complicated and send us dashing for the help file. To overcome this, I'm creating a simple GUI application that would enable you to make use of the main features of G2xpl in a simpler way. Why not subscribe and be sure to be notified as soon as the application is ready? Just click the link on screen now. And that completes this video on how to create and apply new textures for X-Plane 10. Join me next time when I'll show you how to acquire and install new OpenStreet mapping data that will ensure that your maps are as up-to-date as possible with regards to features like roads, rivers, woods, and much more. Thanks for watching.